since you were young, right?
Since I was 10.
Yeah, because your brother was diagnosed when he was 5?
Yeah.
Right? Okay, and so then I think I read you did like door-to-door stuff, right?
I did.
And so like from when you were little, you were like, this is what I want to do, right? Like it was your passion?
Yeah, so, my parents, Will was diagnosed, and so he was put in the hospital for about a week.
Okay.
So my parents, came home from the hospital to tell my older brother, Thor, and I that Will had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which, I had such a limited knowledge of as a 10-year-old girl in the 5th grade.
Right.
So they brought us to the hospital to see our younger brother. And for whatever reason, kind of as his big older sister, I was like, I just felt like this determination of like, I want to be his big sister. And I made a promise to him in that hospital room, like, I will do whatever it takes to help find a cure for diabetes, and I will do whatever it takes to help improve his life. So literally from that moment on in 1996, December 1996, I started knocking on neighborhood doors in Baxter, Minnesota. I'd go around with this clipboard, knocking on doors, raising money for the American Diabetes Association. I mean, I think my parents are like, what has gotten into this girl? Like, I'm just like, knocking on doors, raising money. I'd show them a picture of my little brother and raising thousands of dollars for diabetes. And then I started talking in classrooms at the elementary school about diabetes because I found right out of the gate when Will was diagnosed, people really had a misunderstanding of what diabetes was. They would say things to Will like, your parents gave you too much sugar. That's why you got diabetes. Or they would say, you didn't exercise enough. Even though Will's this 5-year-old kid in preschool who's 40 pounds, right? Who's this active, rambunctious kid. And I was like, how unfair. But for some reason, I realized if I didn't go around and talk to people and let them have this opportunity to sort of ask these questions, I couldn't be upset at them.
Right.
And so I just started going around to these classrooms and giving people this opportunity. And I would talk to them about what it's like for Will to live with type 1. And I would show them the syringes and the insulin. And so that's what started my diabetes advocacy work. And then, I never imagined, because the doctor who had diagnosed Will had told my parents there would be no likelihood that my older brother and I would be diagnosed. Because my parents asked him, and he just said, that'll never happen. That's impossible, right? And so when my mother saw the signs and symptoms in me of a high blood sugar, it was when I was in the 7th grade. I was at a cross-country ski banquet. I was drinking a lot of water. I was drinking a lot of punch during this 3-hour cross-country ski banquet. She saw me getting up, going to the bathroom frequently. All the parents were in the back. All the kids were in the front, right? Yeah, she was keeping an eye on me. When we got home that night, she just said, you're going to test your blood sugar on Will's machine. And as a 13-year-old girl, right, I was like, over my dead body, am I going to do that, right?
I'm
not going to prick my finger. I don't have diabetes, The doctor said that would never happen, And of course, my mother was like, oh, yes, you are. You're not going to bed until you do this. And so, obviously I knew I wasn't going to be going to bed without that. So I tested my, my blood sugar on the machine, which, I'd probably done first when Will was diagnosed. And, my blood sugars were fine. So I tested my blood sugar, and when it counted down, there was no number on that machine. All it said was HI.
Oh, wow.
Which meant that the blood sugar, was unreadable and that it was over 600.
Wow.
And so at that moment, it was like in that split second, I knew, for me, it was like my life was over. You know what I mean? And I knew that my life was going to change forever. I knew that there was no disputing the fact at that moment. There was no change. There was no error. And I knew I had type 1 diabetes. And so obviously then, I was brought in, diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And, I was devastated and in denial.
Do you think it helped having your younger younger brother already diagnosed, or do you think it made it harder knowing what you'd have to go through?
Yeah, so my mom describes it as, the good news was we knew what diabetes was, right?
Yeah.
We knew how to manage diabetes. She had kind of 2.5 years of training, right?
Yeah.
So we had a good grasp on it.
Mm-hmm.
The bad news was we knew what it was like to live with diabetes,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And it takes an emotional toll on people.
Yeah.
You also don't ever get a minute off.
Yep.
Right? With
Full-time
type 1
job.
diabetes, it is a full-time job.
Yeah.
You don't get to go to school any day without packing all your supplies, without having to go to the nurse's office for your morning snack, for checking in before gym, before checking in to do your shot before lunch.
Yeah.
That is your new reality.
Yeah.
And I don't want that reality.
Yeah.
That, as a 13-year-old girl, horrifying.
Yeah.
Because again, as a 13-year-old girl, what do I want to do? I wanted to fit in, blend in. I wanted to look like my friends, act like my friends, talk like my friends.
Exactly.
I felt like now I was the black sheep being a teenage girl.
Right.
When the doctor, when he was diagnosing me, asked at the end, do you have any questions for me, about your diagnosis, for the rest of your life, living with this? My only question to him was, can I go to the junior high dance tonight?
So you were diagnosed the day.
On Friday, it was Friday, March 17th, 1999.
Okay. Yep.
And there was a YMCA junior high dance that night. And again, I'd just been diagnosed with this chronic incurable illness. And sure, I probably should have been thinking about what, I don't know, a plethora of medical things.
Right.
But I think what that question really meant for me was I going to be able to still live a normal life?
Right.
Could I still be myself? Could I still get on with my life?
Right.
And that's really what I wanted to know as a 13-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to go to the hospital. I didn't want to be different.
Right.
And I felt like I was going to stick out like a sore thumb. And that was going to be very difficult for me. And I'll say, for the first year of living with type 1, I was going through a major mourning period.
Yeah.
I just didn't know how to cope with it.
Right.
I didn't know how to manage it. Obviously, kids at school found out that I had type 1 diabetes.
Yeah.
It's sort of hard to hide it when you're having to leave the class early. And, things fly quick in junior high. Everybody knows about it. Kids made fun of me in junior high. Kids thought I was contagious. They asked to move away from me.
Yeah.
People, would grab my cake off my lunch plate, saying Quinn's no longer to eat cake. And so it was really hard for me. There'd be girls, I remember in the first month I was diagnosed, my friend had a birthday party, slumber party, and I was so excited to go. And I remember when we were all rolling out our sleeping bags, one of my very good friends, I was rolling out my sleeping bag next to her, and she said, well, I don't want to sleep next to you because I heard you could die of a coma overnight.
Oh.
And I just remember just being so crushed, is nobody going to want to be my friend anymore?
Right.
Am I that fragile that I'm just sort of do I just have a scarlet letter on myself?
Yeah.
And so it was just hard for me, I think, as a 13-year-old girl to feel strong enough to have a voice.
Yeah.
And so that really all changed when I got the opportunity to go a year later to Camp Needle Point.
Oh, yeah, in Wisconsin.
In
right?
Wisconsin, yeah. So in Hudson, Wisconsin. And my mother found out about it.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go, but she forced me to go.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to go to a place called Camp Needle Point. I thought it sounded awful. But she sent me there. And it was honestly the most amazing experience because I was, for the first time, with other girls my age who lived with type 1. And they lived with it for several years.
Right.
And they had gotten on with their lives.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They had found a way to cope with it.
Yep.
And let diabetes be a footnote instead of a headline in their life.
Yeah.
And so I was able to see how they were able to date guys, be in sports, cope with people who would make fun of them.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, if they can do it, and I saw girls even who were 5 years old who had gotten on, with their lives. I was like, well, I can do this too, And so I left that camp being like, so my pancreas shut down.
Yeah,
like,
so be it.
So be it.
Yeah.
Like, what's your problem? You know what I mean? Like, we all have our issues.
Exactly.
Like, so this is mine. Like, let's move on with it.
Yep.
So I went back to school that fall, into the 9th grade, saying, like, let's redouble down on this promise I made to Will.
Yep.
And let's go for it. And so I just like put the pedal to the metal.
Okay.
And just stepped down even harder on that promise to Will, and kind of went with a vengeance of more fundraising, doing statewide advocacy work, fundraising. And then when I was 16, was chosen as the National Youth Advocate for the American Diabetes Association, which was a total shock to me, being this small town girl
Right. Yep.
and being chosen as the national spokesperson.
So cool.
Getting flown all over the country, being invited to the White House to see President George W. Bush speak, getting to meet with the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Speaker of the House, getting to meet with our Minnesota U.S. senators, congressmen, just an incredible experience. Right. But to realize that I didn't have to be a celebrity, I didn't have to be a doctor. I could be a young person who was passionate, who had a story, and who wanted to make a difference.
Yeah.
And I could make a difference.
Yeah.
Right?
That's awesome. Yeah.
And that was a powerful message for me to learn at that age. And so I think it just propelled me to say, I can do this and I can make a difference. Yeah. It doesn't matter where you come from.
Yeah.
I don't need letters behind my name.
Yeah.
I don't, you know what I mean?
For sure.
I don't have to be a celebrity. Like, we can all make a difference no matter where we're from.
Yeah.
And so I just continued on with that work. And again, back then we were advocating for more federal funding.
Yeah.
We were advocating for stem cell research. I mean, those were the things we were focusing on.
Right.
Fast forward now to the last couple years, our focus has turned almost 100% to the insulin affordability crisis.
Yeah. Because, so do you do daily injections or are you on a CGM?
So I am on an insulin pump and a continuous glucose monitor.
Perfect. And
so I'm on a Dexcom and then an Omnipod.
The Omnipod, okay. And so then how much roughly do you think you would spend per month? Like, 'cause people will spend $1,200, say, and then they can't pay their rent, and we've seen people ration because of it. Did you, like, when you turned 26, were you nervous for aging out of your parents' health care, or was that not a thought back then?
So back then, the Affordable Care Act, like when I was 26, wasn't in place. Okay. So that wasn't a thing. Okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So luckily, I was on an employer-paid plan when I was 22 because I got a job, right? Because I knew how important that was.
Yeah.
So I had an employee plan up until 2 years ago.
Okay.
Because I actually kept a part-time job, like a 0.6 job.
Okay.
So that I could hold on to health insurance benefits while I was speaking.
Yep.
And then I fully dropped to that 2 years ago.
Okay.
That is when I went on Nystrom.
Okay.
Okay, so, the ACA for the state.
Yep.
So roughly, I pay $333 a month for my plan.
Okay.
It's a Medica plan.
Yep, okay.
So for example, I use roughly 2 vials of insulin a month. I use 2 vials of Novolog.
Okay.
Okay. So those vials, when I go to my pharmacy, CVS or whatever, I would pay retail cost $340 a vial at my pharmacy. I know it varies.
Right. Yep.
I've heard people who can get it roughly from $300 to $400.
Yep.
But at my pharmacy, they tell me it's $340.
Okay.
But when I went in January to get it, I paid out of pocket $597 to pick those 2 vials up. So just to keep myself alive for a month, I paid $597 out of pocket with a silver plan under Nystrom.
Yep.
Okay. Then, because I'm on a continuous glucose monitor, for 2 months under my plan to pick up 2 months of continuous glucose monitoring supplies, which is a durable medical equipment one. I had to pay not just over $950 out of pocket. Okay. To be on an insulin pump, which is again a DME supplies, for 3 months, I had to pay over $550 for that. So, and then of course I have doctor's appointments, I have rent, I have a graduate school loan, I have a car payment. You can see why this is such an issue. And you can see why, even though a lot of studies show that the best type of care for a type 1 is to be on an insulin pump and to be on a continuous glucose monitor, it's cost prohibitive. How does somebody do that if they're not making a lot of money?
Exactly.
Right? Because in the beginning of the year, what had to happen to me? Luckily, I have a father who's a pharmacist who desperately wants me on that continuous glucose monitor. And so he's like, I'm willing to help you out with that so that you will be on that. Because we had a very scary incident happen with my younger brother, who's a type 1, about 2 years ago now, where he was not on a continuous glucose monitor. He was on injections and just poked his finger. He was very against wearing anything. It wasn't about cost. It just, he didn't want to wear a pump. He didn't want to wear any CGM. And he was found unconscious in his apartment by an ambulance and almost died from a low blood sugar. And if we had not called the ambulance, he was living in Denver at the time, he would have died. And that is an instance of why continuous glucose monitors are so important. Because it will alarm you when you are going low. Obviously, my mother and I flew out the very next day. We got on an emergency flight, flew out there to be with him. And I had an extra Dexcom with me. So I know this probably isn't right, but I slapped that Dexcom on him that next day. I was like, you're not going to any training. I know enough. I slapped that sucker on the back of his arm. And the good thing is he's not taken it off since. And he did go and get subsequent training, but and got a prescription, all that. But he loves it. But the important thing is he has not had a hypoglycemic reaction since. But here's what crushes me is that so many people with type 1 diabetes, they don't have it. And I was with somebody at a hearing just a couple weeks ago, sitting next to me, a woman named Michelle. Her insurance plan, Humana, denies her a continuous glucose monitor because they say it's not medically necessary for her. And she says that the insulin that they force her to be on, which is the Walmart insulin, right, that we hear about all the time, which studies have shown in a type 1, you are at a much higher risk for these very severe low blood sugars, hypoglycemic reactions. So now they forced her to be on this insulin, which is terrible. Absolutely, to me, inhumane. Okay? When her husband is at work and she has to take this insulin, because they will not approve of a CGM and they don't have the money to pay for it cash, because who would? She literally goes and lays out in her driveway so that if she passes out, somebody would see her. Now, what kind of world, what kind of country do we live in? That is the health system we're in. You know? So to me, my work centers around making sure that these items are not items of luxury. And I think we need to educate people to let them know why it's advantageous for health insurance companies to cover these things. Because to me, they should want to, again, it is much less expensive for them to cover these supplies than pay for my younger brother to have an ambulance ride and a hospital visit than just to cover the Dexcom supplies. Or for Michelle, who is having all these bad low blood sugar reactions, just pay for the right insulin.
Yep.
Put her on a CGM.
And then you won't have hospital visits and everything.
And all these adverse reactions or these complications. You know, to me, it just is so backwards.
Yeah.
But we need a force of diabetes advocates stepping up, speaking up. And so that's what I'm so passionate about, is empowering other people to tell their stories.
Yeah.
You know, because not one person can do this alone. And that's why I'm so inspired by the incredible advocates here in Minnesota, because I think we've all lit a fire here. And I'm just so proud of the group here in Minnesota.
Yeah, and you guys just started in January, you had said.
Yes.
And because Nicole asked you to lead it.
Yes.
Nicole, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so, you know, there had been this, Senator Little had put together this insulin roundtable or this insulin hearing back in December. And so, you know, Nicole was invited, I was invited, and a couple other people who are now in, you know, main members of our chapter, you know, were invited. And so obviously that December event got a lot of press. And so Nicole was involved with T1 International, you know, the nonprofit organization. And so, you know, because we got so much press and there was such good response, you know, it was like, well, we're going to have to get something organized for the legislative session. And so I had known Nicole before because we had connected, because we have a mutual family member, actually.
Yeah.
My dad's cousin is married to her aunt, I believe, or to Nicole's aunt.
Okay.
So it's kind of like we're family twice removed or
Yeah.
something. So we call each other family, but we're not technically blood relatives. But, you know, in Minnesota, it's practically like we're relatives. And so I met with Nicole and she said, hey, I think we should start this chapter. But she just said, you know, I have a lot on my plate. You know, I work full time. As you know, she has a lot of media requests. She said, I'll do this, but I need you to be the chapter leader. And I said, I'm not going to be the chapter leader unless, you know, you're fully on board and you play an integral role in this chapter, because to me, Nicole is the backbone. She has started this national conversation on the topic, because I think you need a face to every movement. And Alec, her son, has been that face. And so, anyways, when she said that, then I said, okay, great, let's do it. And so we started in January, and it was kind of like, let's just start. And so we had sort of this small group of people, and it just took off like wildfire, and we didn't really even have that much structure. You know, it was just like, let's go. And then, you know, we had some great champions and some great key members of our group, and it just took off. It really just took off.
That's awesome.
We want everybody to be a part of it, and it's exciting and it's thrilling. And to me, like, there's nothing more energizing than, I don't know, I've always said this is the best therapy I could have ever received. You know what I mean? Like, when I look back and I think about struggling with living with type 1, the best therapy I received was feeling like I was giving back to the cause. Right? Was, instead of sitting around and throwing myself a pity party, which frankly is very easy to do with type 1, it was saying, okay, instead of complaining, I'm going to try to do something to change it. And so for me, that meant championing different things that could affect change. And so to me, I like then to try to inspire other people.
And you do a great job at it.
You know, because I believe it, right? You know, so it's just natural for me, because I get excited about it, because it has so helped me in my journey. I want people, I know what it's meant to me to tell my story. I want people to tell their stories and feel empowered, you know, to tell their story and to feel empowered to tell their story to elected officials, to testify before the Senate or for the House, and to meet with our elected official, you know, and feel like I'm the constituent. I vote you in or out of office.
Right.
You know, and I think sometimes
Hear
we
my
get that
voice.
backwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and so I've been so honored to be the chapter leader, but I just feel like it is such a collective effort of our group that I'm nothing, you know, without all those members.
Right.
And I just can't wait to see like where the next year takes us.
Yeah. And for people to, do they apply to be in the member like chapter, or do they? So if you apply, are you in it the whole time, or can you volunteer for like one event?
Exactly.
Or...
So the great thing about our chapter is people can be a part of it in any capacity that they want.
Yeah.
So we actually now, because we're getting a little bit more organized, I'll say now in the second part of our year, we've actually created a form where like if you email our email, you know, Minnesota Insulin, the number 4, all at gmail.com, we'll email you back a form, like a link, where you'll put in your information, and then we actually like have like check boxes of like, how would you like to be involved? Is that to actually be on a committee? Would that be to lend a certain expertise, right? So would that be social media? Would that be, you like to write press releases? Do you like to help organize events, right? Whatever that could be, fill in the blank. Would you like to get involved on a policy level, right? Whatever that is, okay? So we have all these different ones. And then we get that, our outreach person, and then they'll follow up on that.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So it's going to be a little bit more organized. And so you can volunteer in whatever capacity. So it's not like, you know, you sign up and now you have to be at every single meeting and there's a membership requirement. We want to meet people with where they want to be involved at.
Which is awesome.
We also want to really be all inclusive of outstate Minnesota. You know, I'm from Baxter, so I'm 2.5 hours away from Minneapolis. So it's important to me that we're not just including Metro voices. It's important that we are including every single voice in the state of Minnesota, right? We need full representation from every single city, every single point in the state of Minnesota. That's very, very important to me because we have very, very important stories to tell from rural Minnesota. And those are different stories maybe than we'd get from the Metro. And so we need to hear those stories and have those stories represented. So I know that we're going to also make a push this year to do more webinar types of either trainings or trying to get some of the meetings, you know, via webinar. And so also we're looking for that type of feedback from people as well.
That's awesome. It's cool that you can be as involved as you want.
Exactly.
So it doesn't feel forced.
Totally.
Sometimes I know certain volunteer things that I was like, oh, I'm going to do this. And then it was like, you have to do 8 hours, like 4 days a week. And I was like, I can't
Most
do
people
it.
can't do that, right? So if
So
it's even like people just wanted to come to our August event, great. Like we were thrilled if somebody just wanted to show up to that and show support. Wonderful. Or like if people just want to be a part of, let's say we do another spring rally day at the Capitol, love it. You know what I mean? That would be a thrill. Or if people just want to tell their story, you know, if we need them for a testimony, wonderful. You know what I mean? Cool. Or have their name be a part of, you know, if we need them for a media story, great.
That's so cool.
You know, because we really want to sort of have a Rolodex. Because we've not had that in the past. And we get these, you know, now we're always contacted by the media. Especially like anytime now, like a story comes out about another health insurance company, you know, has announced this or, I don't know, fill in the blank, right? So we just, we want to be much more organized and be able to elevate a lot more voices this year. And then also really train everybody and empower them so that they feel comfortable telling their stories in front of media if they're testifying. So we'll have more training opportunities like that.
Oh, that's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm curious about your book. I haven't read it. But I've heard about it. And it's called Will I Get Diabetes If I Kiss You? Or
it's called If I Kiss You, Will I Get Diabetes?
Okay.
Yep.
And it's just, is it just like a testimonial of your story or?
So it was inspired. So it was inspired by my senior prom date, who who asked me that question when he was going in for a kiss. You don't have to read the book to know the answer, right?
Right.
No, you don't get diabetes.
Yeah.
2, he didn't get the kiss. 3, he's a Catholic priest now. So I think we all found our happily ever after. But the book was really, it was founded from this place of, like when my grandmother got breast cancer, there were so many books that I could go on Amazon, and there were a lot of books about personal experiences, inspiration, what is it actually going to be like? But when I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes as a teenager, there was nothing.
Yeah.
It was all medical jargon books and diabetic cookbooks.
Yeah.
Right? Like, not helpful to me.
Right. Yeah.
So, I had blogged for a lot of years about just my personal opinion on a lot of things.
Yeah.
My personal experiences, rude comments people had made,
Yep.
dumb questions people had asked me.
Yeah.
And so I was always complaining about this, like, why aren't there more books? And so my mother was like, well, stop complaining and write it.
Yeah.
So then I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And so then I wrote it. It was first published in 2014.
Okay.
And now actually I'm going on the 3rd print, and that will be, the 3rd edition will be released on September 9th.
Oh, exciting.
And so actually I have new content that will be in the September 9th edition.
Exciting.
So that will be released. And to me, it's certainly my personal story, but it talks about other people's stories. And coming out with a 3rd edition, what I've learned from, now we've sold, I don't know, thousands of copies of the book, which has been, a thrill.
Yeah.
But, I initially kind of wrote it, kind of for my former 13-year-old self in a way. But that a lot of people, it's not just for teenage girls, right? But that a lot of people really appreciate it who are parents, right? Who are just trying to understand, like, what is it like for my child or adult with type 1 diabetes who are going to live with it? Healthcare professionals who are trying to better understand, right? Like, what is it like for somebody who's getting diagnosed with type 1? Because it goes from me as a 13-year-old all the way through college and young adult.
Yeah.
And again, I think anybody who has type 1 or type 2 diabetes can relate.
Right.
Like I have a chapter about the diabetes food police.
Yeah.
And everybody with diabetes can relate to that.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean? So the biggest compliment to me is when people say, like, how relatable the book is.
Yeah.
How if they've met me, it sounds just like me.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's an easy to read book. It's just over 100 pages, but it's very easy to read. I wanted to make it an easy to read book for people. And so we've just gotten really great comments from people that they can just, if they don't have diabetes and they're reading it, they can better understand it. My mom wrote an essay in the back of the book about what is it like to raise 2 children with type 1 diabetes from a parent perspective.
That's awesome.
So, I'm really proud of the book. And that it's ever made it to a 3rd edition
That's so cool.
is really exciting for me.
Yeah, that's awesome because you have, like, there's all those books of, I'm going to be a parent. I'm
Totally.
this, and then what do? You just get thrown in
Totally.
and have no idea.
Totally. And I think a lot of people, again, no matter what your age is when you're diagnosed with type 1, it is a huge shock. And there's just not a lot of books. Even to this day, I mean, I think I was the first one who wrote a book from a firsthand perspective of a type 1 as an adolescent. I think I was the first one ever. Now, obviously, more books have been written subsequently after, which I'm happy about.
Yeah, you started it.
But again, not a lot of books out there.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we have books like that.
Yeah.
So that we can help people through, and that we can help people who don't have diabetes understand what is it like.
Yeah.
It's not a pity party book. It's a book of, yes, there are days that you struggle, and there's days that you can triumph over the disease as well.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to show in that book.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And this is something I'm curious about, off topic of your book.
Yeah.
They call it like the gray market in Minnesota with the test strips.
Oh, yeah.
Is that like a super big thing that you've heard about? Because I've read like 2 articles on it.
You mean like the signs on the side of the street?
Yeah, those where they like, I think people essentially buy a bunch of test strips and then they resell them for like, so people buy them for a lower cost, but then that person's still making money off of it. Is that, like, do you hear a lot about that? Is that super common? Or...
So, I think it's becoming more common.
Okay.
You know, I've seen more signs on the street. I certainly, even though I usually have more test strips than anything, right? I don't ever have a problem with insurance covering that.
Right.
That's the one thing, right? First of all, I would never sell my test strips.
Yeah.
2, I would never call that number. I just, it just makes me a little nervous.
Yeah.
But again, I understand people have to do what they have to do.
Right.
So again, I think if something's packaged up, I guess, I don't, honestly, to tell you the truth, I don't know much about the gray market. I haven't done that much research on it.
Yeah.
I know obviously about the insulin black market a lot more. But I think it's popping up more because, again, we see that insurance companies are limiting the number of test strips that they will provide to a patient.
Yeah.
Which I think, how dumb.
It is, yeah.
Like, if a patient wants to test their blood sugar, it means they want better control of their diabetes, which will prevent, which will reduce complications, will reduce hospitalizations. You know, it's like, it just boggles my mind.
Yeah.
You know, why, and I hear this all the time from people with diabetes who will contact me. They're spending hours on the phone with these health insurance companies begging for more test strips.
Yeah.
And, you know, they just limit them to like 4 strips a day. And it's like, if you have a sick day with type 1 diabetes or type 2 diabetes, you're testing like 14 times that day.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're sick, if you have the flu, if you have ketones and your pump site busted out or you have bad insulin, or, I mean, you just have some bad days.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why these health insurance companies, right?
Yeah.
Don't understand that. It just, it's so counterintuitive to me.
Yeah. Do you think, like, there'll be more of a push to, as, like, insurance companies are capping insulin prices, do you think there'll be more of a push to make the test strips more, like, give them more to their patients? Or do you think that's not lesser of an issue than insulin, but, you know?
I think our group has done an incredible job to keep diabetes in the media and insulin affordability in the media. And I think that put public pressure.
Yes.
And we have gotten confirmation from those health insurance companies that our group was a major reason for doing those caps. My hope is, because we've opened the door with these companies, that they will want to bring us to the table to have discussions, right? To have constructive dialogue about how can they better serve their diabetes patients. And I hope that then that dialogue can include test strips, continuous glucose monitoring supplies, pump supplies. And we can, again, I'm sure they have very intelligent people working for them.
Right.
But my question is, do they have people with type 1 and type 2 diabetes contributing to the conversation at the decision-making tables?
Right.
And that's what concerns me sometimes at these high-level discussions.
Yeah.
Do they actually have people who live with this disease every single day who are there telling them what it's like?
Right.
And, you know, or is it just they're trying to decide a numbers game?
Right.
And they don't understand it.
Yeah.
So I hope that because, you know, they've credited our advocacy organization for helping with this decision, that we can open that line of communication.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Because I know test strips haven't been in the forefront, but I do know so many patients who struggle with that.
Yeah.
And again, our group knows it's not just an insulin issue.
Yeah.
And I know because just in the last week, so again, now we're in September.
Yes.
I just got a bill for my pump supplies. It was $260 for my pump supplies. So, you know, we're in September now.
Yeah.
Still paying $260. My continuous glucose monitor supplies I just picked up was $360.
Wow.
And that's in August.
Yeah.
Or September.
Yeah. Wow.
So, I mean, that's still a lot of money for people.
Mm-hmm.
And then my insulin, now I've gone to Canada,
Yes.
but I just, because I was filling my other prescriptions, I just wanted to see how much it was.
Yep.
I wasn't going to pick it up, but I wanted to see how much it would be this month if I went to pick up the 2 vials.
Yeah.
It was going to be $255.
Total or per?
$255 for the 2 vials.
Okay. Wow.
That's still a lot of money.
Yeah.
again, like, how do working class people or lower income people continue to pay that much money every single month and again, this is just to stay alive.
Yeah. Yep.
That's no doctor's appointments. That's no lab work.
Right.
That's no rent. That's no food. That's no utilities. That's no if a tire popped.
Yep.
It's no gas. That's no children. I mean, I don't have children, luckily.
Yeah.
I mean, in the sense of
pain.
Pain.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that makes it difficult.
Has an effect on your life.
Yeah.
Take into consideration if you can have kids.
Yeah, and
to pay for it.
And that's crushing to me. I've heard type 1s say, I will never be able to have children. I've heard several type 1 women say this. I will never be able to have a child because I will not be able to afford it. My dream of being a mother cannot come true because of this. Yeah.
One last thing. What do you have a tip for like newly diagnosed diabetics, people with diabetes? If they come to you and ask for something, is there one thing that sticks out to you that you would tell them about it?
I'll say 2 tips that I'd give people if they are recently diagnosed. One of those tips is to make sure that they're reaching out in some capacity to other people living with type 1 diabetes that are roughly in their age range.
Okay.
So if they live in a rural community like I did, you know, in Baxter, that was difficult.
Right.
Back then, the ADA actually had chat rooms.
Okay.
That was a long time ago, back in '99. But so I would be in chat rooms.
Yeah.
You know, now they have the diabetes online community, which is just phenomenal.
Yes. Yeah.
So I would suggest if you're in a rural area and there's not like a diabetes support group or like I know some area hospitals have even like diabetes kids support groups or like kind of fun meetups.
Yeah.
If there's not something like that, or even if there is, hop on to the diabetes online community. I think they're very supportive, great resources, or like one of the diabetes private Facebook groups, or as a parent too, very supportive, great advice, and make sure you are posting questions or anything, because no question is dumb or hasn't been asked before.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, but make sure you are getting community support.
Yeah.
2, my other big tip is find the right diabetes care team.
Yeah.
I'm always surprised, and again, I shouldn't be surprised, but I always want patients and people with diabetes to know that they are the boss, right? They're the boss.
Yeah.
So if you go to an endocrinologist or a diabetes nurse educator and you do not like them, they are demeaning to you, they are shaming to you, they make you feel less than, fire them.
Yeah.
Okay?
Find a new one.
Just because they have MD behind their name does not make them better than you.
Yeah.
Okay? You will be the one living with this disease 24/7. My endocrinologist always put it great to me. He said, Quinn, you're the quarterback, right? I'm the coach.
Yeah.
He said, ultimately, you're the one who's going to run these plays.
Yeah.
And it's true. I'm making these decisions 99% of the time.
Yep.
He is the one who's going to give me all these different ideas. Okay? He went to medical school.
Yeah.
So it's his job to give me different options that are going to work the best for me. But he ultimately knows he can't be a dictator.
Right.
That's not going to work.
Yeah.
So you want to find somebody who's a great coach, who's sympathetic, empathetic, and who wants to be a coach to you.
Right.
So if you can't find a good care provider, find a new one. Reach out to the diabetes online community. Say you're living in this area. Do you have any suggestions?
Right.
And trust me, they will give you their honest, candid opinions about doctors, diabetes nurse educators, a dietitian. They're phenomenal for that. Because I think that's what will set you up for success.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than being with a bad medical team that makes you feel like crap.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's always important to me to tell people you're in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
Don't ever forget that.